CX Quick Tips. We're sitting here and it's January 12th, 2021. We're already a few weeks into the new year. We did have a little bit of a hangover here in the States in regards to 2020. There's some things that carried over in Washington, D.C. that we're trying to get rid of. And we're working on that. And we want to focus in on 2021. And so I invited our good friend and our contributor at CX Global Media, Mike Aoki, to join us to talk about three questions that you need to be asking and answering for 2021. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, okay, so we talked about contact center success.
Mhm.
Now, you have your unique perspective and experiences, and I'm looking forward to sharing those. But if you could get us launched off on these three questions that we absolutely need to be focusing in on and answering.
Well, certainly. I guess we'll start with the very first question, which is to think about, what is your work from home strategy right now? And one of the biggest shifts last year, of course, is that whole trend about working from home really got accelerated for contact centers. And so the first half of that last year was getting your agents moved to home, getting them back in their house with a laptop and a VPN and a proper connection. But then the second half of the year was more about how to really, really develop that. And I think this, when it comes to 2021, the first half of this year will be how to really elevate that to the next level, how to make that work from home experience or your hybrid contact center, partly remote, partly in the office, to work more smoothly, especially from a leadership and support perspective. And I think that's one of the biggest trends that we'll take a look at.
And so when you start talking about, for me, I start thinking of, chaos, and I start thinking of settling, and I start thinking about the opportunity for us to, now take a step forward. So if you were to say from your experiences and what you've been seeing, how much is the stabilization, or how stable are we, or are we still have a whole lot of chaos that's happening out there?
I think from a technical standpoint, from an IT standpoint, logistical standpoint, that has settled quite a bit. So as far as people being able to have the right equipment, stable connections, working from home, et cetera, I think that part of it, the technical side of it, seems to be working much better now. I think some of the support systems, as far as things like quality assurance, coaching, are beginning to come into place as well. I think that third level, though, which is the people leadership side of things, the employee engagement side of things, that part is still to be developed, still to be solidified.
So
And
what,
because of that, there are some challenges right now in the sort of the third part of this contact center evolution towards being work from home or hybrid, which is the part about being able to really emotionally support your agents and help your agents feel engaged with the overall company. And that's really crucial. And one of the things that we've seen happen is the fact that you've got agents now, employees that might have been with your company for a number of years, that are working from home. The benefit, of course, is that they remember the office. They know what it looks like. They've been there before for years. They probably know their team leads, quality assurance coaches, workforce managers, et cetera, face to face for a number of years. So there's existing relationships built there. Even with that, though, being at home for 6 months, 9 months, now going to maybe a year and a half by the summer, some of those things get strained. Personnel turns over. You haven't seen somebody face to face in a year and a half. So even some of those are strained. The biggest vulnerability, though, I find, Jim, is the fact that you've now got, and again, contact centers, call centers tend to turn over staff quite frequently. And so now you've got a whole generation of new agents now this past 9 months and going into the first 6 months of this year that maybe have never even seen the office. They were interviewed virtually. They've never even seen the office. They didn't do hire training virtually. They haven't even actually met their trainer face to face. They've never met their team leader face to face. It's all been Zoom calls. And so that's the case we've got now, people in the contact center that don't have that same face-to-face emotional connection to the office or to the people there. It's almost like they're mercenaries, guns for hire, that have just been, hired on board. They're in their living room or at their dining table. They're taking calls. They're doing what they were told to go and do, and they're being managed to the numbers, average handle time, call volume, et cetera, but don't have that emotional engagement to the company. Don't have that sense of loyalty in terms of what that company means. Don't have that sense of buy-in necessarily, that they're representing the overall organization or the brand at all. In essence, it's more of a job as opposed to really focusing on what are they doing to really go above and beyond for that customer. I think that's a vulnerability that's there. And it's one that has to be addressed by people leadership. And the key about this really is focusing in terms of engaging your front line in that way to really help them make them feel like they're a part of the company overall.
well, when you're talking about that, um, there's a couple things that I start thinking about when I start looking at some of the statistics in regards to staffing levels. So, I'm hearing a lot that are saying we are grossly understaffed. And
Mhm.
I know for me, when you start thinking about operations, when I was, in contact centers and managing operations, is that everything kind of just goes to the wayside. So in other words, training gets put on hold. Other leader development that gets put on hold. I mean, it's just, hey, just take care of the volume. So that's why I kind of mentioned about the whole stabilization. Are we stable enough? If I'm in that situation where I'm looking at I'm understaffed, and we also know that contributes to even more turnout. It's like
Mhm.
a catch-22 scenario. How can I stop this train from rolling so that I can start getting effectiveness be and items that are more building effectiveness be put into place?
Well, Jim, that's a really great question as well, because you've got contact centers that are in that scenario where they're just trying to play catch up all the time and the volumes aren't matching. A couple of resources there. One is take a look at any kind of technical advancements you can use to try to go and siphon off the easier, more straightforward calls. So looking at things like, artificial intelligence, chatbots, having even something as simple as having a better self-serve website in the sense of the content that's on there, the descriptions that are on there. Those things can help take off a lot of that sort of easier, kind of more transactional kind of phone calls. So password resets, what are your operating hours? What's the location of your store in Wyoming? Things like that, being able to really siphon off the bottom layer of calls to try to free up at least some time that you can actually spend developing your frontline and your frontline leaders. That's one aspect, is a technological side. The other aspect of that is to try to justify a case for more headcount, looking in terms of how damaging the employee turnover is. I mean, think about it this way. For most companies, if they're bleeding off 30% of their customer base every year, if they're losing 30% of their customers every year, they'd be having a heart attack. They'd be in a panic right now about that. Yet meanwhile, in the contact center industry, we'll look at a place that loses 30% of their frontline agents in a year and think, oh, that's normal. It's not as bad as 50% like last year. 30% is fine. They're not thinking about how much cost there is for that. When you lose 30% of your contact center staff in a year, you've got to rehire new people. You've got to train them, right? You've got to be able to help get them up to speed. Rule of thumb in our industry is it's 6 months to competency, just bare minimum competency, and a year to really get good at your job like that. And the problem is that if you're spending all your time in that first 6 months, recruitment, hiring, training, trying to get them up to speed, and then they leave, you're not getting any benefit from that at all. And like you said, that's a vicious spiral downwards. It costs so much money. So there's a case to be made as well, just from a cost perspective, to try to be able to retain more agents or staff up a little bit more to stop the bleeding and be able to be able to stabilize as well.
All right. So what you're talking about right there, and we talk about at the call center coach virtual leadership academy, is one of our core competencies needing to be business acumen.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That whole thing that you just explained right there, to me, I often find is one of the biggest and most significant gaps that does not get communicated outside of the contact center. That
Mm-hmm.
is, if my path to proficiency with this type of job, and if I am constrained and I am not allowed to replace somebody until somebody leaves, is a significant issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely is, because you're always playing catch up in that sense. And when you think about other parts of the company, they typically don't work that way, right? They typically don't wait until someone's left or accept a 30%, annual employee turnover rate as being part of the job or part of what happens there as a status quo. Any other area of the company, if they were bleeding off 30% of customers, 30% of salespeople, 30% of your IT, they would address that and try to find out what's happening there. And so I think one of the keys really is to go and look at this from that business standpoint about overall long term, what is best for the company to stop that bleeding and increase the efficiency. I think the other vulnerability here, though, as well, especially when it comes to work from home and hybrid teams, is again getting back to that agent retention issue. And part of this is for team leaders is that, when you look at this from a leadership perspective and you focus on your frontline leaders now, your team lead, quality assurance coach level, it's training them and making them realize the fact that they're not just there to go and handle escalations or to go and listen to calls and grade them on a scorecard. They are also the lifeline that the frontline work from home agent has to the company. And again, getting back to somebody who's, in their 20s, in their living room, they just got hired by this company, they've never been to the office before. Their only lifeline to the company is the team leader, right? The QA coach, the IT help desk, the workforce manager. Those are their lifelines to the company. And to them, that's what the company is, or those people they talk to every now and again during their shift. And so those individuals in the frontline leadership level, team lead, quality assurance coaches, et cetera, they need to be trained on agent retention, right? We train our frontline agents in customer retention. Let's train our team leads now in agent retention, employee engagement, building relationships, right? Being able to go and help empower them. I think that's a really critical point, because that'll help start to reduce the agent attrition. And again, help get rid of some of these other problems going forward as well.
Most definitely. Mike Aoki, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. How do CX Quick Tip listeners actually get in touch with you?
Okay, well, fair enough. I'm on Twitter at mikeaoki.com, M-I-K-E, and then A-O-K-I, my last name. Sorry, I shouldn't say .com, but Mike Aoki on Twitter. Also on LinkedIn as well. You can look me up. And I'm always happy to go and help answer questions. And I've also posted a lot of articles as well about the contact center industry.
And thanks for being a regular contributor to CX Global Media. Mike Aoki, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Great. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. And thanks, everyone.